I hope that everyone's had a good Monday so far. Welcome in here to Back at the Crib, a new venture on Monday nights, college football related. But you know how we do it. If you are a fan of old school Blitz, then we're going to get into a little bit of everything here on this evening. And I can't think of a better way to kick off the night than by welcoming in my man Dion Amade and our featured guest. Colby Daniels on this Monday evening. Fellas, it has been a long time, too darn long. If you're just asking me my personal opinion, I hope everything is well. It is good to see both of you and looking forward to continuing this on Monday nights. What's going on?
Well, I mean, you know how it is. Monday Night Football, and the night that we start this is the night that it happens to be the Cowboys playing on Monday Night Football, and so me and Kobe probably going through it right now.
No, man, this thing is going absolutely according to plan. I'm rooting for a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. It's draft season already. If you're a Cowboys fan, this season is lost, right? So let's start looking forward to April, and the Cowboys are doing exactly what I was hoping they would do, which is what they've done all year long, and just play lousy football. And let's secure that top 5 pick, baby. What's up?
Listen, I
Look at
promise
these faces.
I did not pick tonight because the Cowboys were playing specifically. I just wanted to get started, and it just happened to be on a night that the Cowboys are playing. But like both of you pretty much already know, yeah, it's time to move on to 2025 NFL season. Even in my own case, with that pathetic performance from the Niners yesterday. Man, it's good to see you both. I hope you're all doing well. Colby is a new television star across the state of Oklahoma. Dion
Yeah,
is Dion, just
yeah.
continuing to live the dream. And me, I'm a digital producer. So what's up? I hope all of you are doing incredibly well right now. And this thing has the idea of just being mainly college football. I would say about 90% of it, but there's a lot of other stuff that we've got to get into, including whatever that was on Friday night on Netflix, and we'll spend some time on that coming up a little bit later. But first, I just have one question for you both, and it is fill in the blank. The Big 12 is blank. Colby, we'll start with you. Fill in that sentence. The Big 12 is blank.
The Big 12 is woof. Woof. Every time I watch a Big 12 game, I'm like, woof, what is this? I mean, there are some teams that are certainly better than we thought they were going to be entering the season. There are a lot of teams that are significantly worse than we thought they were going to be, but just the overall brand of football that's being played in the Big 12 leaves a little bit to be desired, I think, in terms of watching the best that this conference has to offer in comparison to maybe some of the best that other conferences have to offer.
All right, Dion, you're around it a lot. You see a lot of Oklahoma State. The Big 12 is blank.
Underrated. I mean, I don't mean to go like all the way to the opposite side of what Kobe's saying, but like here's the
Dude, you're not
deal.
on the Oklahoma State radio network right now, Dion.
No, no, no. Listen. Here's the deal. Everybody is so like, oh my God, there's so much parity in the Big 12, and there's you never know who's gonna win or who's gonna lose, bro. That's all of college football. This is not just the Big 12. That's not just. I mean, we just saw LSU lose to Florida. Like you can't tell me that parity's not happening in the SEC, in the in the Big Ten, in all these conferences across college football. That's just the way college football is just going to go nowadays because of all the talent going to every which way and nobody having depth. Don't just blame the Big 12. I mean, I know there's more parity than other leagues, but I mean, there's still some good teams around, and
There's
I think
there's
there's
a
just
big difference between parity, which I love in college football, and we're seeing
yeah.
more of it this year than we've ever seen, which makes every Saturday that much more exciting. There's a difference in that and having a conference that still has 12 teams eligible to win the freaking conference championship because nobody can separate themselves. Nobody's good. They're all just kind of average.
The front runner for the conference, Dion, in Colorado. Think about that statement in its own right now. The front runner is Colorado, has the worst offensive line in college football. They're like 120th in the offensive line. They're almost as bad as what Oklahoma is across the offensive line, and they're the front runner in the conference now. I mean, the fact that he is as good as he is in Shador at quarterback for the physical beating that he has taken the entire season, I mean, could should give you at least a little bit of an idea about what we're dealing with in the Big 12 conference right now.
I mean, but here's the deal, and we've seen this all across. I mean, the higher level you go, the more it's less about the X's and O's and more about the no the higher level you go, it's more about the X's and O's. But the lower level you go, it's more about the Jimmies and the Joes. We've talked about this before, and at the end of the day,
Oh
the
my
star
God, Pat
power that
Jones. Fucking
Travis
hear one more
Hunter
time about the
and
Jimmies and the
Shador
Joes.
have, it just outweighs the fact that the talent that they're playing around. I mean, you just got to admit it. Those dudes are just really really good. At the end
They
of the
are
day,
really
and
good.
they
I
erase a
think
lot of mistakes.
we would all be naive to not at least address the fact that they are significantly better on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football than they were a year ago. I mean, I thought they were going to collapse this season because it's a very rare thing in college football to make the level of improvement from one year to the next that they have made. And that's at least given them a chance, right? I'm not saying it's all world, but a year ago, their playmakers literally had no chance to make
Mhm.
plays. And at least they're having an opportunity. Shador has an opportunity to be Shador, right? He's not just getting killed, he's taking hits, but it's night and day different from at least where it was last year.
I mean,
Who
that
knew that?
freshman left tackle that they have, I mean, he's putting up stats comparable to a lot of guys. I mean, I mean, I see it on Instagram all the
He
time.
weighs 250 pounds. Like, one of their starting tackles weighs 250 pounds.
not
What
the
are we,
5-star freshman that they got, that
yeah,
number
the other one.
77. I'm blanking on his name right now.
But what are we
But
doing here?
Jordan
What-
Seaton, is that the
yeah,
5-star?
yeah,
What
Yeah.
what are we doing? Yeah, and who would have thought that Warren Sapp would have ultimately ended up turning into one of the best defensive line coaches in the entire country right now?
he's got to
Freaking
chill with the
Warren Sapp.
Mohawk, bro. The Mohawk, I'm not feeling it. Are you guys like here for it or what?
I don't know what I hate worse.
With Warren
that or,
Sapp, I mean, I think it fits.
yeah, I mean Warren's can do whatever he pretty much
Warren's a
wants.
psychopath. When
Yeah.
you're a psychopath, I think you might as
Yeah.
well embrace it and go
Warren's
full Mohawk.
he's a naughty boy. Like he can do whatever he wants.
He's
I'll
killing
say
Warren
that.
could do the hawk mohawk from Cobra Kai, and it would work.
I like Warren Sapp's mohawk much better than I like Dylan Gabriel's shorts that he's wearing as he's playing quarterback for the Oregon Ducks. I don't know where that came from. Dion, you're the younger dude. Like what's up with Dylan Gabriel's pants that he's wearing that he's like cut off into shorts?
Bro, it's getting out of hand with these guys and rolling up their knee pads to their thighs. It's like, bro, at least pretend like you're wearing some sort of knee pads. I mean, the fact that you go into Oregon, you got all that swag, you got all that. It's one of those situations where when you're that guy who has all the money in the world, so you can buy whatever you want, and you think you just buy everything swaggy and you just throw everything on, and you're just like, all right, look, I look fresh as hell. It's like, no, bro, you're doing too much. Dylan, you're doing too much. Put your knee pads back
You
on.
can't hit a quarterback anyway, Dion. What do you need knee pads for?
And give us the illusion, all right? Stop taunting us in our faces that we can't touch you.
All right, topic number 2. Dion, what in the hell has happened in Stillwater this year? Like honestly, and I know that that's like a loaded question, okay? And I just saw Colby's facial expressions on a question like that. I think there's a lot to get into, but maybe we should just start with today because Colby, you sent me the text. It was, hey, here's the list of players that are eligible for senior day, and Ollie Gordon's name is not anywhere even remotely close to that. I did not get to listen to Gundy's press conference today about what he specifically had to say, so we can start there with just what that means for Ollie moving forward. And is this as, I don't want to say as bad as it's been in Mike Gundy's tenure that's there, but man, it's trending in a direction that none of us before we were fired from radio ever thought that would happen.
Oh man, I'm gonna let you chime in on this, Colby, but I'm gonna start it off with, I feel like, in my opinion, from a macro level, it's one of those situations where you have to have two things to be a very competitive team in the Big 12 and in the country, and that's good quarterback play and a good and solid offensive line. And going into the season, we were told and we thought that with those individuals coming back from last year, that they would be a solid team, especially with all the weapons that they have. Well, when you have a quarterback who unfortunately has regressed and is definitely, not stepping into the pocket, always throwing off his back foot, that's not going to help you get your athletes the football on the outside. And then when you have an offensive line who as well as they did to the latter part of the year last year. People have kind of figured things out, and because of that, they've also regressed. And now you can't get your Dope Walker award winning running back going, and everybody's loading the box and not afraid to shut down the pass in the ways that they are. It's a recipe for disaster. And then on top of that, you lose both of your All American candidates at the defensive spot, and all hell breaks loose.
They're the worst defense in college football, like, period. Worst defense in the country. I mean, statistically, they are at the bottom of several categories. I think nobody in the country, or maybe one team in the country, and that this is like talking the bottom of the 134 teams in FBS. I think there's one team that has given up more explosive plays this season than Oklahoma State. I know in conference play, nobody has given up as much total yards. Nobody has given up as many rushing yards as Oklahoma State. The turnovers aren't there like they have been, I think, in years past. And yeah, Nick Martin and Colin Oliver are part of that, but this defense wasn't playing just amazing before, those guys went down. There are definitely scenarios where I think you miss a guy like Colin Oliver, especially late in a game when you're trying to rush the passer. But over the course of 4 quarters, I mean, I don't know that losing Colin Oliver is changing the sum of what we're seeing Oklahoma State produce defensively. Those guys are big-time playmakers, but it just feels like it is an entire unit breakdown over and over and over. And I don't know what the fix is. I mean, 1 week Gundy literally said it was effort, right? Like, literally said these guys aren't playing hard enough. And I think we all were on social media watching different people put plays online and show where guys are like halfway running. It's just kind of been a weird vibe. I think once the disappointment of, we're not going to be able to achieve what we thought we were going to be able to achieve set in, it's just kind of been a different product from that point. And, offensively, I have no idea. I mean, you bring back basically the entire offense. It should be a federal offense to not produce offensive production with Ollie Gordon, Brennan Presley, Dejon Stribling, Rashad Owens. I mean, they are loaded with offensive playmakers, and you bring back all 5 starting offensive linemen, and you can't manufacture offense? Like, it's insane. And the fact that they've stuck with a seventh-year quarterback that has gotten worse. I mean, we had conversations in the offseason. If this guy just stays where he is and doesn't improve at all, you're fine, right? Like,
Yeah.
They made the Big 12 championship game a year ago, for crying out loud, and he wasn't even that good last year. But he regressed. Like, I don't know if it was a mental thing or what it was. Something was different, obviously, and it's just been complete chaos on both sides of the football. Something that no one on this planet could have anticipated, right? Even in your wildest dreams of how bad this season could have gone for Oklahoma State, nobody, even the biggest Oklahoma State hater on the planet, would have predicted that at this point they would be 3-7 and winless in Big 12 play.
To your point about lack of effort and not trying, I think we saw that, in my opinion, about after the second loss on the season, because at that point is when it set in, because the way this team was built roster-wise, with everything coming back, all of us said, hey, if this is not a 10, 11 win season, this is a disappointment. This is a disappointing season. By the time they lost 2, especially, staring down the barrel of that third loss, I think you saw a little bit of the effort go completely out the window, and that's disappointing because it flies in the face about everything that Mike Gundy has preached about over his tenure at Oklahoma State. I don't know I'm like you, dude. I don't know what the fix is. I really don't. It seems like that it's in a pretty steep nosedive right now, and unfortunately, with the way that they recruit, and we've had discussions like this in the past. Technically, I've never had a problem with the way that they've recruited because I do think that they have done a decent job in the money that they have. Remember that story that came out about where their recruiting budget was compared to everyone else in conference?
Yeah.
It was at the very bottom. They have done a good job of the resources that they have of being able to pick out the right players and to bring them in and to develop them and get more out of them based off of where the recruiting rankings were and what their money was. Well, now that you're in this situation where the class is now even starting to fall a little bit more. Have you guys looked to see where their class is at for upcoming signing day? It's at
I'm afraid to look.
It's at 57 with one recruiting ranking. I think the composite might be near 57. Now, I think Oklahoma State's fine as long as they're in that 40 range. I'll even give them the 45. But when you start to fall outside of the top 50 and get closer to that 60 range, that is a little bit more of a problem in trying to fix, in my opinion, what it's doing. Because I think you can get by with a couple of classes that are above top 40. But eventually, at some point in time, this is going to come back to bite you, and this is the wrong time for the recruiting to be trending in that direction the way that it is. Now, they could pull some surprises, maybe even in the late signing period, they could get some more, and who knows what happens ultimately with a portal on this. But, man, it doesn't seem like it's as easy as a fix as some people want to say, because I think we use, and coaches use sometimes the portal as I think it's easy sometimes to go and say, hey, well, you know what, we can flip the roster in a year. Yeah, you can, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work. I think if you're just ultimately relying on that, man, you got to start worrying about what the foundation of this thing looks like.
I mean, look at Florida State, man. They thought they could flip their roster and then turn out and, just put a Band-Aid over everything, have a great year, and then keep it rolling. You see how that's transpired. So that's not the portal isn't the solution at the end of the day, unless you're a program that just has the capital to be able to do it year in and year out, which there's not a lot of universities that can do that. That's not the solution. So it's going to be interesting to see how Oklahoma State goes about fixing it.
Hey, Dion, yeah, you can remain out of this question. I'll just ask Colby because this is an unfair question. Colby, how much apologizing behind the scenes do you think Mike Gundy has done at the request of administration based off of his comments?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, a lot, right?
I don't know how. There's no way that apology, in my opinion, came from Mike Gundy that he put out on
0% chance.
There is none. That came down from the top and be like,
absolutely,
hey,
yeah.
He
didn't even apologize, right? And look, I wasn't bothered by it. I don't even necessarily think that it has to have an apology. Like, if you want to apologize, fine. It wasn't really an apology, though, right? It was like, no. I'm sorry if you were offended. It wasn't like, I'm sorry I did something wrong. It was like, I'm sorry if you were offended. And look, again, I don't think it necessarily warranted an apology. I also am somebody that listened to the entire thing and didn't just take one clip for what it was. I understood the context of the whole thing, and there were some things that he said in that I think were worded badly that give people, an impression about the way that it came off. But I don't think that he had to. But the way that it was received, obviously, was not good. And if you are a big-time decision maker at Oklahoma State and you're talking about $1 billion business that is college football, and there are that many people that are upset, you have to do something to shift that tide from, becoming an avalanche of negativity. And, they also threw it in there on election night, right? I mean, it was just kind of like the all-time non-apology news dump, which I appreciated.
What if we always said perception is reality, and whether or not that Mike Gundy meant that as a shot to anyone specific or not, I happen to be of the belief and opinion that was Mike Gundy being Mike Gundy, which he's always done. I mean, I went together on the website and put together, I think, 6 different instances going back to 2017 where he's basically said the same thing.
That's right.
He's just repeated it over and over and over.
It's received differently, though, when you're 0-7 or 0-6, whatever they were at the time, than if you're 9-2. Or,
and
what your record is.
Weekend.
That's right.
To have all of that happen with the weird weather game that played out. So yeah, the perception was by some that was a direct shot at them. And hey, you can pick and choose to believe what you want to believe, and that's the great thing about one of the problems with social media too, is that hey, if you think this was about you, then that's how some people took it. But I do know for a fact that there were some very influential money people there that did take that personally. And I saw one of them tweet, and he shall remain nameless. One of them tweeted out, was like, hey, Mike, not only do I pay my bills, but I pay some of your bills too. And I was like, oh, all right. So that's how we're going to play it. But yeah, see, Dion, we left you out of that one. You didn't even have to jump in on the conversation on that one. All right. Moving on to the next topic. Who the hell is the OC in Norman next year? And is this a job that is a defining hire for the Brent Venables era?
What do you mean? Who's the OC? I thought Dan Mullen was the guy.
Okay, so for those that don't know, this is a very strange scenario.
This is awesome.
So there I am Thursday night, and this is the second or third game that Dan Mullen has called for Tulsa. And I had heard Dusty on Plank Show hyping up Dan Mullen potentially for the OC job. I mean, we've all had Dusty on the show like 100 times, right? That's just something that Dusty's very opinionated, and we're sitting here, and for anyone to think that Dan Mullen is basically, I don't know, Biff Poggi from Charlotte, I mean, you're out of your mind. He's not. He's just not that guy. He has been very successful in the places that he's been. So as I'm getting ready to go down to the field, I just happen to look, and here comes Dan Mullen up the steps there in the press box at Tulsa. He's like, "What do we got to eat?" And it was like hamburgers and hot dogs. By the way, earlier in the day, he was chowing down on chili and free Whataburger on the Sports Center scene. So my man can put away some food. And he's getting a hamburger and he's putting bacon on it. And I can't help myself. So I'm like, "Hey, coach, Dvorak's been on the radio here in Oklahoma hyping you up for the OC job." And he looks at me and he kind of laughs. He was like, "Man, I told him, better be hyping me up for an HC job, not no OC job." And he said it just like that. Just like that. And locked and loaded and ready to go, he had this stat, Dion, where he's like, "I'm only one of 4 or 5 coaches out of 100 wins in the SEC. Like, he's got to come at me with his resume. Like, I'm nobody, just asking him in the press box." But that's just where he is. That's the belief that he has in himself. He's like, "Yeah, like I got 100 wins in this conference. I'm not taking no OC job. I need a head coaching job."
Let me ask you something, Pop. Just the fact that he rattled off that stat off of his head, do you think he was already aware of the comments that were being
I'm
made
sure,
and was ready
yes.
to answer that from anybody?
I don't know, but I could probably text Dusty right now and be like, "Man, when's the last time you talked to Dan to Dan Mullen?" And he'd be like, "I talked to him like 2 days ago or 3 days ago," right? I'm sure he talks to all of those different guys on stuff like that. But yeah, and we just kind of left it at that. I laughed. He kind of chuckled a little bit, but I didn't take that by the way that he wanted Brent's job. It's like, no, like Dan Mullen is not settling for an OC job. Like, he wants to be a head coach. So I didn't even text Plank that night. I just text Chris the next day and said, "Hey man, just funny little side note. If you want to bring it up on the show today, I talked to Dan Mullen about this." And the next thing I know, he tells Steelman, and then Steely's calling me like on Friday morning, wanting me to record a little soundbite for him so he can play it on his show on Friday. And then it went from there. So yeah, you can cross Dan Mullen off of the list, but I don't. Is it maybe another Oklahoma connection in Jake Spavital, who's getting some run now at Baylor, and kind of how he's turned things around at in the Big 12 in Waco? I don't know, but it does seem like that this is how the tenure for Brent Venables is going to be defined on who he hires and whether that's successful or not, because if it's not, he may not be the head coach there much longer.
Yeah, I mean, you can't miss on this one, right? Especially with as miserable as the offense has been this year. I mean, it's one thing if the offense just doesn't live up to expectations and you're making a switch, but the offense is awful after a decade of being record-setting, right? And they finally fixed the defense, and now the offense is statistically worse than the defense ever was when the offense was rolling. I mean, you have to hit on this hire, and you're also talking about, I know Brent Venables took over this job in a weird time, and there were a lot of obstacles, I think, for him to overcome as opposed to where Lincoln got the job, right? And I think we all understand that, and it's now been 3 years, and there are also a lot of moving parts in terms of why this year has been the disaster that it's been, but there's a point where you don't get to use any excuses, right? When you're at a place for a certain period of time and there's not success, like, you don't get to use excuses anymore. And not that Brent Venables is trying to, but offensively, they have to hit on this hire, whoever it is. And he was asked a couple weeks ago, I think, in one of his weekly press conferences about the next hire and whether it had to be somebody with Oklahoma ties. And he just answered it so absolute, no. I don't care. That does not impact the hire whatsoever to me. I think he understands the magnitude of it, and he's. I think they're going to get somebody good. I don't know if it's somebody that's necessarily on the radar, but I think this will be a hire that when it's announced, we're all going to say that's a good hire. Now, again, whether it works out or not, that's to be determined. But I think OU knows where they are and what has to happen, and the fact that they're sticking by Venables and they gave him the raise before the season started says they are pot committed, right? They've gone all in on trying to make this work right now with this current coaching staff. And to me, that says you got to spend the money to get the right guy at OC.
But here's the thing. I mean, I think Venables came in, and if you could be honest, they were hoping for him to come in and fix the defense and make sure that was stopped, because you need to have defense to play in the SEC. I mean, the offense has been a non-starter. I mean, it's been taken care of in OU for a long time. Did not expect for that to be an issue going into the SEC. Now, here, my question is, with the new OC coming in, I mean, how much of it is his responsibility to kind of get because let's be honest, the reason OU struggles so much is they've had some injury issues with the offensive line. That's been to their detriment. And then on top of that, it's quarterback play.
Well, they had me at receiver at one point too.
I mean, good point. Injuries across the board. So bringing in a new OC, how much is that going to solve the issues over there? Because, I mean, it just seems like a string of bag of luck. And on top of that, who's going to play quarterback? Because like we said earlier during the show, one of the thing that you need to have a successful offense in this country and in this, in the SEC especially, is a good offensive line and a good quarterback. And if they don't have neither of those, who cares who comes in as offensive coordinator? Because you got to solve that issue. But now the question is who does that OC bring in with him at the quarterback position? Because any quarterback who's going to come from the transfer portal or any top recruit is going to look and see who your OC is.
So I look at the Oklahoma situation, and I'm going to draw a kind of a parallel to something that Mike Gundy has said. Mike Gundy said that it took him until year 7 or 8. Remember his comments about what it was like to really be a head coach. He was trying to do way too much. You're right, Dion, to a certain extent. Like, you bring Venables in, and he is your de facto D coordinator in those first couple of years until he gets Allie in there, who he really trusts, not Ted Roof, a guy that is young, that is an absolute animal, the way that Brent looks at Zach Allie and sees a younger Brent Venables is what he sees. Now he's got that dude that he can trust, and that's lined out. The next step in the evolution of Brent, the head coach, is to make the right hire offensively and to become the CEO of the program, where he's not having to dip in and get his hands, ultimately dirty with just one side of the ball.
I don't know if that's ever going to happen with Brent.
Yeah, and I don't know either. I don't.
When
know
you
that,
hear him
that's
talk
the
about
next thing.
defense.
Oh, he lights up.
I hear it every week, every Tuesday when I'm in that press conference. The way that he talks about the defense and the defensive players, it's a completely different vibe than when he talks about the offensive side of the ball. Like, you're not going to rewire his DNA.
No.
So that's always going to be a part of him. Now, he can maybe manage that to some degree. That's always going to be there. But to that point, like, he's also not micromanaging the other side of the ball, right? Like,
he's not.
He's given that to somebody else to take care of, and Jeff Lebby did it for 2 years, and this year it's been what it's been. But you've got to, they hire Seth Luttrell, who I think is a good football coach, maybe wasn't ready for that OC job, especially with an offensive line that we all said going into the season was the biggest question mark on the entire football team. A young quarterback that doesn't have a lot of experience behind a questionable offensive line, and then nobody could have anticipated the injuries that were going to take place to your playmakers. I mean, across the board, right? So then you have to hand the baton to a guy that's never been an OC, like ever, nowhere, in Joe John Finley. So, like, it's been, but to Brent's credit, he's let those guys do their thing, and that's why I say, like, they're going to spend money on somebody because he's not going to be a part. Like he's going to he's going to once again hand the reins to somebody completely. Only this time, it's kind of his job that's attached to the
Yes.
success of somebody else handling those reins.
Yeah, and I didn't think that he was meddling at all. He was letting Levy do that, but a part of the next evolution of that. And you're right, you'll never take that out of his DNA. It's the same way here at Tulsa, like with Kevin Wilson. Anytime you ask about defense, like I have a counter in my head. Like it usually takes him about 10 or 15 seconds before he's making a comment about them offensively because that's just who he is and that's the way that he's wired. And he will fully admit that. And behind the scenes with Truth Serum, Brent Venables would probably admit the exact same thing.
So
the-
question, and you guys have dealt with more coaches than I have from the media standpoint. Can you be a good head coach if you can't dial that back?
I think you can.
Yeah, I think you can. I don't think that there's one set rule in stone. Like there are a variety of ways, right, to get the job done and to be a good head coach. So I do not want to just put everyone in a singular box and say, hey, you have to do this. But I do think though that getting it right defensively has taken a lot of pressure off of him, right, to morph into the CEO of a program overall, besides just being there every snap, every single time, almost like another position coach. And a lot of those guys were like, this second time I brought up Kevin Wilson, but he said, hey, Bob was doing that at Oklahoma. Like Bob, when he first got hired at Oklahoma, was basically like the highest paid defensive backs coach in the entire country because he was DB coach and head coach there for the first couple of years. So they all do it, but they all eventually have to start to pull back a little bit from that and kind of morph into that. And I just don't think Brent hasn't done it long enough yet to have that entire CEO experience of head coach on the sidelines taking care of everything. But this is the year one of that next step in the evolution, which is why, I factor that into who he's going to hire as the next OC.
Yeah, he's got his guy defensively now that can essentially be an extension of him with the defense. And, he's never going to not be a part of that, but it allows him, I think, to release a lot of the reins on that side of the football because he has so much trust in Zach Alley, and it allows him to, I think, put his attention elsewhere. It's never going to be to the same degree offensively that it is defensively, and that's why this hire is so important. And I think this year also puts into perspective, and we've talked about this for the last 2 years, like the Jeff Lebby, Dylan Gabriel offense over the last 2 years in no way was what Lincoln had going with Baker and Kyler and even Jalen Hurts, right? But fans were so spoiled by some of the greatest offenses in the history of college football that they looked at Dylan Gabriel and Jeff Lebby and wanted to kick them out of town because they weren't as good as Lincoln Riley, Baker Mayfield, right? Or Lincoln Riley, Kyler Murray. Like those were still really good offenses that were good enough to win. And everybody wanted to run them out of town, and it just puts it into perspective this year what they actually had, right? Like
two Heisman winners and one Heisman finalist. So I mean, that's let's be realistic here.
One of the things that I miss about radio is asking questions like this. Is that a coveted job? And Norman, is the OC position a coveted job? Your thoughts, guys.
Shoes, dollar signs speak, bro, and they're about to pay.
I mean, if you're a head coach at anywhere except for Alabama, Ohio State, you're taking the OUOC job, right?
Man, I don't know.
OUOC. I'm kidding, obviously.
See, I fell for it.
You fell for it.
I fell for it. I know, because I've already seen the post. Like, GJ
OUOC job better than head coach at Michigan State.
Yeah.
Right.
There's some of those that are out there for sure on that. It's going to be very fascinating to see who ultimately ends up on the short list of guys that he could potentially bring in.
I mean, what did Ohio State do? They threw a bunch of money at Chip Kelly, right?
Yeah.
I think OU's going to have to do something similar where it's somebody that once again,
OU's got Ohio State money. When did that happen?
Hey, true or false? OU will spend 7 figures on the OC.
Oh my gosh, yes.
True.
The starting point of that salary may be north of $2 million easy. I think it has to be if you're going to get it right.
whoever they get, man, it's going to be a lot of pressure that comes with that position and that role, because Venerables is feeling it, and that OC is going to feel it too, man.
Okay, do we like what's happening in college football right now? Do we like the fact that more talent is spread around? This is the ultimate goal of NIL, ultimate goal of the transfer portal, that we do not have elite level teams. I have felt like that we haven't really had an elite level team since that first Georgia team that won the national championship, they were just clubbing everyone. So we've been on this trend, but are you guys fans of where we're at now in college football with, if parity is the word you're looking for, that's fine. But to me, it's awesome because we're having conversations with teams like Arizona State, BYU, Iowa State's still even in the mix now for the Big 12 about having a pathway forward. It hasn't watered down anything to me, and I hate the argument about watering stuff down. Like, no, it's made it better.
Yeah.
It's made it better in college football that we have all these teams that are still fighting for it, and then we'll start paring them down when we get into the playoff.
I think college football is better than it's ever been. We don't know. We can't guarantee who the champion is. Like, I think there are a couple teams that probably have a better chance maybe than others, but there's no one team or two teams that just look like they are so far above and beyond anyone else. I think this playoff is going to be a ton of fun. And especially like going into this weekend, guys, how many, like, people want to say, like, if you have 12 teams, it waters down the regular season. That is absolutely false. Like, I was looking at a game today that I thought in years past, this game is meaningless. Oh, yeah. Ole Miss, Florida.
Yeah.
This weekend, right? Florida played Georgia really tight 2 weeks ago, and then they pulled off the upset last weekend, right? Ole Miss has a couple losses. In the previous era of college football, Ole Miss has 0 shot to get into the 4-team playoff. And Florida, like, who cares, right? That's a game that has 0 meaning. Ole Miss is in line for one of the 12 playoff spots. That's still a playoff game, essentially, for them, right? They've got to beat Florida, and then I forget who they play after that, Mississippi State. Like, Ole Miss, I'm just using them as an example. They've got to beat Florida, and they've got to beat Mississippi State, and they're into the 12-team playoff. If they lose one of those 2 games, they're out. Those are essentially 2 playoff games for them. Arizona State, BYU, Colorado, Iowa State, they all essentially have playoff games these last 2 weeks. Like, across the country, there are way more meaningful games that actually matter in terms of what we're going to watch in the postseason than there have ever been, when it's generally like we get to November and there are a handful of games that actually have real meaning.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the national championship.
I feel the parity and everything, and I am very excited that on a week-to-week basis you can watch TV and you can never guess who's going to win. But also on the top of it, I do miss the dominance a little bit, because it makes those upsets a little less, gratifying at the end of the day. I mean, because it just seems like you just never know what you're going to see. I do miss the dominance. I'm not going to lie.
So wait a minute. Are you a parity is mediocrity guy? Is that what you're telling me? Is that where you're falling? Do you put parity into the mediocrity category?
I don't think it's parity as mediocrity. I just feel like when you had those upsets and you had those, powerhouses getting taken down, and you had, the student body rushing the field, it meant something. Now it just feels like why are you rushing the field? Any given Saturday, your team can win or lose. There's no surprise here anymore.
I just think it's going to be harder to have those dominant type of teams now because of roster turnover. Like, it's going to be really hard to have teams that are not only talented but cohesive across the board, right? Where not only is their talent above and beyond everybody, but they're able to perform without making mistakes better than everybody every single Saturday. The portal and the amount of additions and subtractions that you have from a roster every year now, I think makes that much harder than it was in the past. So we may never get back to a point where we regularly see teams like that, whether it's, I mean, you're always going to have blue bloods that have more talent than everybody else, but to separate themselves where like one team just reigns supreme the way that, we've seen over the history of college football, I just don't think we're going to see that ever again.
I absolutely love it, because you guys know, I've said this for a long time. This sport has had the shield of not being professional for so long, which was just we're streaming. It was bullshit the entire time. All right, that feels so good to be able to say that out loud. I love it. It's BS, and it's been BS for decades. And finally, now we're to this point where even though they still want to try to argue it in front of Congress and, oh, we need help, it's as professional as it's ever been. And now with the talent spreading out, right, across the country and all these other markets, it's more professional than it ever has been now. And they have no one to blame but themselves for us getting to this point, for continuing to fight it the entire way through. And it's as close to a professional model as ever. And what happens in the pros? Like, the talent gets spread out, right? At any given week, a team can beat another week, and college football is almost mirroring that now from a professional model, and because that's what we've had, and we've had for a very long time. I love it, man. It's finally coming home to roost.
I
Hey,
mean,
get
the
ready
Detroit
for
Lions- the Detroit
ready
Lions
for
are
Greg
in the
Sankey.
NFL now.
Oh, yeah. Finish your point on Greg Sankey, because I know where you're going with it.
Get ready for Greg Sankey to watch like 3 of his teams make the 12-team playoff. Because last week we had 4 of the top 5 from the Big Ten, right? Because the Big Ten plays nobody. Like Ohio State, Oregon, like they've played each other. They don't really have any other great wins. Indiana's played nobody. Who's the other team there? Penn State, the only game they've played is Ohio State, which they lost. Like, wait until the Big Ten puts 4 teams in there, and maybe the SEC has 3, or maybe the SEC has 4 also. Wait until Greg Sankey gets into the offseason and he's like, yeah, we're not doing this again.
Oh, he's
Our
already-
conference is what? Yeah, like,
they're going to 14. Like 14.
is it going to be 14, or is it going to be the doomsday?
I think
like,
they stop at 14 for right now. But to your point,
they're either going to guarantee themselves like more spots than everybody else, or he's pulling the ripcord on this version of college
Bro,
football
we
already.
can't keep
Why-
growing this number.
Why is Greg Sankey essentially threatening the powers that be of college football virtually every single time that he opens his mouth, and yet no one wants to talk
Because he
about it?
can.
Like, yes, and you know why? It's because everyone signed off power and gave power to the
That's
two
right.
conferences, and now they're sitting here saying, you know what? If this doesn't go the way that we think that it should go, blah blah blah. Insert blank here. It's incredible. It's incredible because he threatened the committee before we even got to one of
Yeah.
the rankings. Like right there in Nashville. It's spectacular. And for everyone now that's like, I can't believe he would say something like that. What do you expect when you give someone all the power? You give them all the power and you never expect them to actually wield the power? What's the saying about what's the point of having FU money if you never actually say FU? Like, you gave them FU power, and like they're wielding it now, and they're going to continue to wield it. So I can't wait to see what those rankings look like tomorrow night for sure, because it will be more controversy. Have either of you had any significant trouble with the rankings and what you've seen so far?
I mean, it's too early, I think, to have real issues with what they've done, right? There's and look, in years past, I think it's a different story because it's not, a big portion of it's not actually going to play out on the field, right? Like in years past when there were 4 spots, like again, most of these games were meaningless. So there were a lot of scenarios where you kind of look at it and you're like, there's not a lot of room for there to be a lot of movement unless somebody actually like loses a game, right? Unless Alabama actually loses a game, there's not room for movement. In this, there's still a lot of room for movement because there's still a lot of meaningful games. There's 5 tickets, right, that are 100% punched in terms of the conference champions. So I think we still have so many meaningful games to be played as opposed to the previous era where, I think this thing could get completely shaken up 2 weeks from now. Whereas in previous years with only 4 spots and the amount of games that essentially don't have any impact on those 4 spots, like you're not, there were times where I think you wouldn't see tremendous movement. So you could see where there are certain paths where it's going to stay the same, right? And so a ranking doesn't make sense because you can see where it's not going to change if it goes this way or that way.
If you're complaining about being the 13th or 14th team, I understand complaining about being 5th or 6th, but complaining about 13 and 14, we got to stop. Come on now. You had your chance. It's too late.
You know what it's going to end up being, right? It's going to end up being like, say, like 10-2 Tennessee or 11-1 Indiana, right? And it's going to be the Big Ten and the SEC fighting over that one spot because Tennessee's played all these big boys and they lost one more game than Indiana did, who, lost the only big game they played all year, but they have a better record. And that's it's going to end up being something like that everybody throws a fit about.
I think it's hilarious that all this is happening, and yet you've got these 16-team conferences with an 8-game conference schedule, and it makes me laugh. It makes me laugh so much when everyone's talking about strength of schedule. Yeah, that's virtually meaningless to me when you have an unbalanced conference schedule and all these massive conferences. Like, hey, you wanted all these teams. You had an opportunity, SEC, to add the 9th game, and you just didn't decide to do it. All right, 2 more things before we're out, and I appreciate you guys because we've hit the 45-minute mark. Travis Hunter. Man, I don't know where both of you are at. I mean, he's a Heisman Trophy winner. Let's just be honest. What do you make, though, of the we're starting to see and hear different things about the draft selection process about, all right, are you drafting this guy to just be one or the other? Or if you're a team and you've got this crazy idea, and can it even work at the next level? Not, of course, not 130 snaps a game. Like, no one's thinking that that's crazy. But if you're drafting a dude like that, are you drafting him for his entire versatility, every tool that he has in his bag, or is he just a defensive back?
I'll let Dion go first.
Bro, let me tell. I'm not saying this to the teams.
By the way, props to Dion too, not you, Dion, but Sanders Prime the other night being like, you don't smoke weed or drink or nothing. I'm like, dang,
straight A student, straight A student, baby.
The campaigning for him to win the Heisman to me is like, bro, go win football games.
No. They've done an excellent job of marketing that young man. And you know what? That's the reason why we're saying and sitting here crowning him the Heisman, because let's be honest, Cam Ward, Dylan Gabriel, Genty from Boise State, all those guys are having phenomenal season, especially Genty, the running back. I mean, he's doing something that people haven't seen in a long time. And if any other year, I think I would be, shooting like, hey, this guy's got to be the dude.
If Genty played at Alabama, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
It would be over, dude.
Yeah,
it'd be over.
No. I kind of argue against that.
If he were playing at Ohio State, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Dude, if that was happening at Georgia right now, it's over.
We wouldn't be having the conversation.
Yeah.
It wouldn't even be close.
Both sides of the ball, guys. I mean, they put up his numbers versus.
And he didn't become the odds-on favorite until last week,
bro. I'm telling you right now, like and the reason for that is because this marketing campaign has been phenomenal, and he's done a phenomenal job of just being productive. But going back to Pop's original question, going into the league, my guy, it was all fun. We enjoyed the circus, but now you're in the NFL, all right? Don't be giving these guys 2 players for the price of 1. Don't let them just over here just pay you as one individual and let you do double duty. You can't be working both shifts and the boss come in payday and only give you, 40-hour paychecks.
That's the thing about him, though. He seems to love that. Like, he'd be the one guy, and until Dion gets in his ear and like, listen,
relax.
You shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be doing this at all. It's pretty incredible, man. I
don't think his body could.
I don't know either.
Survive playing that many snaps in the National Football League.
Yeah.
Like it works in the Big 12, right?
It's been fun though, man, because we all remember how impactful was Chris Gamble that year from Ohio State when he was playing on both sides of the ball the year they won the national championship. Now, he started both ways, I think, in only 5 games, which is laughable when you look at what Travis is doing, but man,
and he wasn't their
so
number 1 offensive threat either.
No, at all.
Travis Hunter's Colorado's number 1 offensive threat. It's incredible. He's obviously a corner at the next level, but I will say, like, teams are going to use him offensively.
They should.
It's just not going to be he's not going to be a starting receiver. But they're not going to neglect the fact that he has that skill set. They'll have some packages for him that they use throughout games, but I don't think it's something that you'll see a ton of.
So I was looking today because I was just curious. I was like, how could anyone have anything negative to say about him in the seasons that he's had? So I had to search, and I found one. And your guys are going to laugh.
I found one as well.
You're going to laugh when you hear what it was. Be like, well, well, he isn't that great because he's only got 26 tackles on the season.
That's it.
Dion, how ridiculous is that dumbassery of he's only got 26 tackles on the season? Tell him.
Hey, let me tell you something, all right? as from the some of the greatest quarterbacks that have played this game, I ain't tackling everybody, but I'll cover anybody. That just let him do what he do. I don't care if he avoids a couple tackles here and there.
They actually have to challenge you, and he has to catch the ball in order for him to tackle somebody. Like, no one wants to throw at him. In that Baylor game, they had a free play, and they took a shot at him. And the one time they threw at him, what did he do? He picked it off, and it was a free play. And then I don't think Baylor went back at him the entire game. Like, they know. Like, everyone knows. Yeah, 26 tackles. That's why he shouldn't win the Heisman Trophy.
I mean, his coach didn't tackle, right?
No. He made
like,
an
literally
entire
didn't
career.
tackle. Yeah.
An entire career.
Who do you think is coaching him?
All right. Before we get out of here, give me your thoughts on Friday night. Were both of you tuned in? The spectacle that was Jake Paul and Mike Tyson on Netflix. I was working. I was covering high school football, so I was in, I kid you not, Kiefer and then Sapulpa having to shoot high school football. So, but by the time I got done and was on the way home, I was pulling it up on the stream, like trying to watch it on the phone, but it kept going in and out. Now, my wife was at home trying to watch it herself, and she was giving me reports along with Twitter about how bad that it was. But did both of you take it in live? Did you have the same type of problems? And then we'll get into some of your thoughts on the madness that was.
Good.
So, I mean, I was watching it, of course. Obviously, I wasn't at home. I was out and about, and I went to one of our local watering holes to take in the fight with some friends. And that's the thing. Everybody was complaining about the buffering and all that stuff, and there was no problem at the bar that I was at with buffering or anything. It was I maybe because they have a commercial account, Netflix account or something, I don't know, but there was no buffering problems at all. So that was cool. But I mean, from the fight standpoint, I mean,
can I just say, by the way, that Twitter was made for events like that on a Friday night because, Colby, you sent me the one where it's like the old Scooby where they pulled the mask off and it had the Bally Sports logo underneath from Netflix. I mean, Twitter's a cesspool, but Twitter is built for events like that on a Friday night.
Oh, yeah.
If we all just want to take a steaming dump on something, right? Twitter is the place where we all like meet together and we collectively hold hands, sing kumbaya, and dump all over whatever it is that is an absolute disgrace, which was what Netflix was on Friday night. I had issues as well. I finally got to the point where I just paused it and waited like 5 minutes and then hit play from there. So I didn't get to like watch it in real time, but I was like 5 minutes behind. And that at least was significantly better. There were times that it was pixelated, but for the most part, it was much smoother that way. By the way, I got to mention the Serrano-Taylor fight was one of the best brawls I've ever seen in my life. Like, I am a combat sports fan, and that was one of the best just brawls I've ever seen. So that was awesome.
Dude, it was so good. My wife let my 7-year-old watch it.
It was amazing.
It was like, hey, come here and watch this.
Unbelievable.
Girl power.
Watch these two girls. Yeah.
Dude, the combinations. It wasn't just like one punch. Like, they were trading like 6-7 punch combinations that were all landing. I was just wowed by not only just the offensive output overall by both of them, but the ability to withstand the offensive output from the other one. It was awesome.
Bro.
My one issue with, I think, the meltdown that took place about the actual main event, not Netflix, just the actual main event is, what the hell did everybody think they were going to watch? Like, when you tuned in to watch 60-year-old Mike Tyson fight Jake Paul, who's lost to the only actual boxer that he's faced, and he's beat a bunch of old, underweight MMA guys and a basketball player. Like, what did you think? Did you think you were about to watch like a great sports spectacle? Because if you did, you're an idiot. Like, we all watched because it's a train wreck, right? We all watched because we knew it's going to be something stupid, and like, let's watch the clown show, right? So when it was terrible, my thought was, yeah, that was exactly what I thought it was going to be.
Okay, I'm with you on that because yes, common sense should take over at a certain point. But we live in a world where there's not much common sense anymore, and that is also the part that amazes me about that is because I, like you, had a very bad feeling. Was I? Of course, I wanted to see like Mike. What was it? What was the one Friday the 13th? Was it like Friday the 13th 5 when Jason like punches some dude's head off like when they go back to Manhattan? Like I wanted that to be the visual of Jake's head like flying into the front row. Of course I wanted Mike. I grew up on Mike Tyson. I'm going to root for Mike.
Of course.
He's one of the athletes that is revered from the time that we were growing up. But it's a little bit of the marketing brilliance and the bleep show that is that some people actually thought that they were going to tune in to actually see a decent fight with a 60-year-old Mike Tyson, who I don't think has his neck has moved since like 2001 from the way that his head movement was in that. It just it was a little bit sad, but that's all part of the brilliance that is. And I can't stand the Paul brothers in general, but where I will give them credit is that they have been able to actually convince dummies that are out there and consumers that they are going to put on a viable product, and,
Right.
and people fall into their trap.
Like
All right,
I
one
watch it,
question-
but
one
I
question.
obviously understand that I'm about to watch trash. Like I know that it's going to be trash going into it.
Yes.
One question before we get out of here, mainly you, Colby, since you're pretty much the combat guy out of the three of us. Now, when Mike Tyson was fighting and he was biting that glove and biting it really hard continuously, in my head I was thinking, okay, at some point his hands are just tired, and so he's biting the glove to keep that hand up so he can rest a little bit. Was that what he was doing, or am I tripping, or there was something else going on?
So apparently he has an oral fixation with biting that he was
He said that, yeah.
he was taken care of by doing that. There's also some speculation that he was doing that to keep himself from knocking out Jake Paul, because I guess there's speculation that in the contract he would not have made nearly as much money if he knocked out Jake Paul than if he doesn't knock out Jake Paul. And there's
Again.
speculation that he was biting the glove to like keep himself from like throwing a giant shot that might land and put the lights out.
This is exactly what I'm talking about in terms of how they build these things.
Yeah.
Because then stupid stuff like this gets brought up. Not that the biting of the glove question is dumb, Dion. The fact that people will be like, no, it was in the contract, man. It was like he was trying to contain himself. Like that just keeps building and building and building. And 2-3 weeks from now, people will forget about the absolute crap that we watched on Friday night because they're too wrapped up in this nonsense about the script that leaked out the day before, right? About Mike's going down.
Colby was the first person I saw drop that out there. I was like, what
all
is
of this nonsense. All right. I do have to bring up the broadcast.
By the way, I was just sharing that. I didn't actually believe that that's what was happening. I just,
Clarify.
for the record.
The hell is Netflix doing with that crew that they had to entertain us at the time?
Pop.
But the best tweet of the night was the picture of Cedric the Entertainer, where he had on his hat and someone said he looked like he was a Nigerian scammer. Like that was absolutely hilarious. He looked like he had a condom on his head. Like he was just out there. Like Rosie Perez is a massive fight fan, but I don't know if Rosie Perez needs to be on any of the commentary at all. It was just absolutely bizarre, the entire broadcast in its own right.
Roy was just pissed to be there, right? But he
Oh
like
my
couldn't turn
gosh,
down the
yes.
check.
He
was
couldn't turn down the check.
He's just
He
like,
couldn't
this
turn down-
sucks.
You
But
could,
yeah,
the way he was dressed, Kobe, you could tell. Like he's like, bro, I'm just here so I can get this check.
that's right.
I'm just here so I don't get.
And then you
fired.
have Morrow, who's just trying so damn hard. It's like, dude, settle down.
Relax, B. Relax. And also, Kobe, answer this. And maybe I don't know, it was because I was in the bar, but it didn't seem like they didn't have Rosie Perez's mic up enough, and like Roy Jones was like they didn't have the levels correct on her mic, or was I just in a bar in an environment that didn't do her voice justice? Because I just wanted to hear her.
I can't speak on the sound because not only did I have chaos around me with my children making noise, but there was like a 5-minute period where Netflix was literally not giving me sound.
Yes.
Like the sound was just gone. I'm watching the video with no sound, and then it came like so. I don't know how much of that was just like the video, like what we were watching, just not being a good product via Netflix, and how much of that was just maybe bad levels. But I don't. Yeah, I can't speak on that.
Even the Tyson ass shot was just bizarre. Like they go
Bro.
in his locker room to do the interview, and the guy that's interviewing him and the
It was his son.
cameraman's there.
It was his son.
Yeah,
It was his son.
I know,
Yeah.
I know. Is doing that interview, and they know he's standing there in his jockstrap. Like they know that, and at no point in time was there any word back to the producer that was like, "Hey, I'm just letting you know, like Mike's ass is hanging out right here. Like you're gonna see 60-year-old Tyson ass that's right here. Maybe we shouldn't necessarily continue to film him or pan away and maybe see the loving reaction that he had with his son and to see what his reaction was as Mike is walking away because you know you're getting ready to have ass cheek on it. I mean it played in perfectly with the circus that is that broadcast, but it was still just odd that there wasn't some producer that was trying to take control of that damn thing.
That happened, and I was like, see, that's exactly what I expect to see when I watch this product is somebody's ass hanging out after a pre-fight interview. But somebody saw that and was like, hey, we're about to see a really good boxing match.
Bro.
Yeah.
All I know is they better get all this stuff straightened up before Christmas because if they mess any of this up and Beyonce comes on stage, it's going to be a mayhem out here.
Yeah, but they're not going to have now. They say Netflix numbers are fake, like 60 million. There was all this pushback today about they kind of make up their own rules on what their numbers are. They did get approval though for Nielsen ratings on the NFL games that they have, so those will actually be real numbers by the time they come around. But they won't have. It's not like they have the Super Bowl. There's not going to be 60 million people tuned in for an NFL game. It'll be, the 25 to 30 that's typically there. I don't think they'll have the production problems with that. But still a little bit concerning that you've had several live events now, but that's easier to say when your server's trying to handle 60 million people that are tuned in at one time to try to catch some fight. That's happening.
Deanna, are we getting OG, like old school Beyonce, or are we getting country pop Beyonce?
I think we're gonna get country pop Beyonce. I mean, they're gonna be in Houston, Texas.
They're both overrated.
Don't you stop, Pop. We're trying to make this thing grow and trying to make this thing a something. Don't get the beehive on us already, bro. Chill. Let us live.
Apologies out there, fellas. It's good to see you, man. I hope both of you are doing well. Like I said, I miss hanging out with you guys, but it's good to have a little outlet here on a Monday night. We won't go an hour every week. I can tell you that for sure. We'll just try to knock this out in 30 minutes, do a little college football chat. But it was too good not to reminisce and kick it back old school a little bit with you fellas tonight.
I tell you what, man. I was at the Mexican restaurant before I went to the bar to watch the fight, and this guy was our waiter the whole time. And then while he's dropping the check, he goes, "Hey, man, so what you and Pop and Kobe been up to lately?" I was like, they're TV stars, but I tell you what, we're putting together a podcast, a little streaming show. So when we start on Monday, he goes, "All right, man, that's perfect for me. I'll tune in." So the people been asking about us, fellas. They talking about us in these streets. So we got to come back with a vengeance.
Well, shout out to my dude at the Mexican restaurant that Dion was at. For,
No free pub.
For
Sponsorships.
showing some love. Yeah. Looking for all the sponsorship opportunities that we have. Hope the family's doing well, Colby. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you guys.
All
Your
right.
beautiful faces.
We'll see you back here next Monday night at 8:30 after another wild college football spectacle. This little ditty's called Back at the Crib, and we'll see you again coming up on Monday at 8:30.